Yes, ma'am. If there's time at the end of the hour. If not, I'll have you do it tomorrow. Okay, so section 2.7, dealing with some functions, dealing with operations on functions, okay? So, how do we have here? Question number 1. They give us two functions. They give us f of x is what? X plus 3. And g of x is x squared. You don't need to write this down. I mean, it's right there on your paper. And ask us to do 4 things on this. They're asking us to find f plus g of 3, f minus g of 3, f times g of 3, and f divided by g of 3. So all they're asking you to do, you can do 2 things. You can add, like for example, part A, you can add the functions together and then plug in 3. Or you can plug in 3 for both of the functions and then add them together. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to add them together, okay? So for part A, if we add x plus 3 plus x squared, we're going to have x squared plus x plus 3. Then we need to plug in 3. If we plug in 3, 3 squared is 9, plus 3 is 15. Again, we could have plugged in 3 for each function, then added them. Wouldn't have mattered, same thing. If you're wondering which one's quicker and easier, they're the same. They're literally it's tomato, tomato. Okay? Then if we subtract these, take f minus g. So if we do that, we're going to have x plus 3 minus x squared. Now, do we have to put it in the right order? We don't have to, because they're not even asking us. They're asking us to plug in the number. Okay? So if we do that, we plug in 3. We have 3 plus 3 minus 3 squared is 9. 3 plus 3 is 6. Minus 9 is negative 3. For part C, if we multiply them, if I multiply x squared times x plus 3, if we do that, we'll have x to the third plus 3x squared. And again, we plug in 3. There's nothing special about 3. They just want you to plug 3 in for all these. If I plug in 3, 3 to the third is 27. 3 times 3 times 3. Plus, when I plug in 3 here, remember you times, I'm sorry, you don't times first. You do powers first, then times. 3 squared is 9. Times 3 is 27. 27 and 27, 54. Then we divide them. X plus 3 over x squared. That doesn't simplify. Just leave it as x plus 3 over x squared. We plug in 3 for the last time. 3 plus 3 is 6. Over 3 squared is 9. 6 ninths simplifies to 2/3. Okay? Any question on that? Okay, I'm not really sure exactly why they make up part. When you look at numbers 3 through 8, it says for part A, it says f plus g of x means simply add the functions. Then f minus g of x, that means subtract them. F times g of x times them. And f over g of x and divide them. Then part B says find the domain of the first 3 things we did. Then part C says find the domain of the last thing we did. So all it's saying is on all of these problems, add them, subtract them, multiply, divide them, and give me the domain for each of them. That's all it's saying, okay? Add them, subtract them, multiply them, and divide them. And what is the domain for each of them? Okay, so this first part, okay, f plus g. I'm not going to show my work on this one. You should be able to do that in your head. If I add x squared plus 2 plus 2x squared minus 1, we're going to have 3x squareds plus 1. Okay? We'll do the domains at the very end. Okay? F minus g. This is a little bit tricky, okay? If we look at this, I'm going to take my x squared on f. So I'm going to write this out over here. You don't necessarily have to. X squared plus 1. No, plus 2. 2x squared minus 1. If I take x squared and I subtract off the f function minus the g function, 1x squared minus 2x squared is a negative 1x squared. And I'm going to take 2 and subtract minus 1. 2 minus minus 1 is 2 plus plus 1, which is 3. Okay? F times g of x. If I multiply those, we're going to FOIL these things out. If we do that, x squared times 2x squared is 2x4. My outers, I'm going to combine these steps. I think you should be able to do this. My outers is negative 1x squared. My inners is positive 4x squared. 4 minus 1x squared is 3x squared. And the last 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And f over g of x, if you divide those, okay, this doesn't simplify. It's just going to be x squared plus 2 over 2x squared minus 1. So you added them, subtracted them, multiplied them, and divided them. Then parts B and C, again, don't worry about part B and C. We're just doing all of A, B, and C all at once, all at the same time, okay? So, what's the domain here? Again, what am I allowed to plug in for X? What numbers can I square? Anything. And be careful, some students say negatives. You can't square root negatives. I mean, you can, but they're imaginary, okay? You can times any number by itself. So you know what your domain here is? All real numbers. What's the domain on this one? All real numbers. What numbers can I take to the fourth power, to the second power? All real numbers. Okay? Now, this is where you got to be careful. Is our domain all real numbers on when you divide them? There's two situations where your domain is limited. When you have a negative inside of a radical, or if you have a 0 on bottom, okay? Now I want to say this real slowly and real carefully, because I have a feeling there's too many students, too many students, okay, that don't understand this, okay? And what I mean is this. We can't have 0 on bottom. I'm actually allowed to plug in 0. 0 is okay on this one. If I plugged in 0, 0 squared is 0, times 2 is 0, minus 1 is negative 1. 0 is fine. So what you need to understand is this. I'm going to say it real slowly, okay? You're not allowed to plug in something on bottom to make 0 on bottom. So what we need to do is find out what makes 0 on bottom, and then we say we can't use that, okay? Find out what makes 0 on bottom. I mean, let's do a real easy one. What makes 0 on bottom there? 10. We found out that 10 makes 0, so guess what? You're not allowed to use 10. You can't use 10 because that makes 0 on bottom. So the way we do this is we set the bottom equal to 0. Let's find out what makes 0 on bottom. So let's set the bottom equal to 0. 2x squared minus 1 equals 0. How do we solve this in 6 words? First 2 words, what are they? Real simple. It's first two. Plus 1, that's 2 words. Plus 1, 2x squared equals 1. Then what?
Divide by 2.
That's 3 words. Divide 2. So x squared equals 1/2.
Square root.
Square root. There's the 5th and 6th words. Square root here, square root. Now be careful. We square rooted, so plus or minus. So what you need to understand is, I can plug in whatever I want for x, except for radical 1/2 or negative radical 1/2. If I plug in radical 1/2 or negative radical 1/2, you get 0 on bottom. So your domain is everything except, you're not allowed to plug in radical 1/2 or negative radical 1/2, because it will make 0 on bottom. Okay, number 5. All right, so we give you 2 functions, radical, this will be a quick one. Radical x plus 5, and the other one is radical x plus 5. Add them together. And don't think hard on this. Some students say, well, radical 2x plus 10. No. What's one radical x plus 5 plus another radical x plus 5? What's that?
Radical x plus 5.
No, we're not timesing them. Careful. We're not timesing them, we're adding them. What's one radical x plus 5 plus another? What did you say? 2. 2 what? Radical x plus 5s. 2 radical x plus 5s. Okay, subtract them. What's radical x plus 5? Take away radical x plus 5. 0. Okay, this is what you were doing a second ago. What do you get when you have radical x plus 5 times radical x plus 5? Just x plus 5. Because, I mean, when you times something by, I could do this. That's the same as radical x plus 5 squared, those cancel. So, x plus 5. Okay. All right, and then if you divide them, f over g, radical x plus 5, divide by radical x plus 5, what do you got? Ooh, not 0, careful, 1. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky though, okay? What's the domain here? I should have labeled this domains here. Domain here. Can I plug in whatever the heck I want for x on when I add them up? Give me a number I'm not allowed to plug in. Just give me one number I can't plug in. Can I plug in 4? Sure. 4 plus 5 is 9. Radical 9 is 3. Now, can I plug in 1? 1 plus 5 is 6. Do you guys know the square root of 6? I don't know what it is, but can we take the square root of 6? Sure. What can't we take the square root of? Is it negatives? Because they're imaginary, okay? So give me a number just give me one number you can't plug in. Negative 2 is okay.
Negative 6.
Negative 6, okay. How about negative 12? How about negative 1?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the smallest number we can plug in? Or actually, what's the biggest number we can plug in? Can I plug in negative 5? Is that okay? Or not?
No.
Why? Can you take square root of 0?
Well,
Can't?
I don't know.
Sure you do. What's the square root of 9?
3.
Why?
Because that's how it is.
Why? Because 3
Divide.
times
3
is 9. What's the square root of 100?
10.
Why?
10
What's the square root of 0? Come on.
0 times 0 is
So what's the square root of 0? 0. Yes, you can take square root of 0. You can't take square root of negative, but you can take square root of 0, 0. Because 0 times 0 is 0. Okay? So what makes 0 on this one? Negative 5. Okay? So we have to plug in numbers that are what?
smaller.
Not smaller, bigger. They have to be bigger than negative 5. For example, can I plug in 100? Sure. Something smaller than negative 5, like negative 2 or negative 12? Negative 12 is smaller than negative 5. You're thinking negatives. We're backwards. Okay? So x has to be bigger than or equal to negative 5. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Okay? When you look at when we subtract them here, okay? What am I allowed to plug in for x? Hopefully you guys have been thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean? What can I plug in for x here? What?
There is no.
There is no x. So, is my domain all real numbers? Not quite. Not quite, okay? Here's why, okay? Yes, it's simplified down to 0, okay? But before we simplified it down to 0, can you just plug in whatever you want? No. You have to plug in numbers that are what? Bigger than or equal to negative 5. They got to be bigger than negative 5, okay? Again, I want to make sure you guys understand this, okay? Watch. If I give you this right here, x squared plus 10x plus 25 over x plus 5, okay? If I ask you to now, give me a number I can't plug in.
Negative 5.
I can't plug in negative 5, okay? Now, just watch though. This factors to x plus 5 times x plus 5. It does. Don't trust me. I'm not trying to throw a curveball at you. Over x plus 5. Did that help at all or not if I factor that?
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
Cancel.
So we're left with x plus 5. Just x plus 5. What numbers can I add 5 to? Anything. So is the domain all real numbers? No. And here's why. Yes, I can add 5 to any number. But, okay, when are you allowed to have 0 on bottom?
Never.
Never, ever, ever. Listen to what Mirza said. He said never. Okay? He said never, and he's right. Okay? So, can I plug in negative 5? Well, I don't have 0 on bottom. Did Mears say that you can plug in, you can get 0 on bottom if you cancel stuff off later? Is that what he said? You said what? One word. You said what? Never. You're never allowed to. Even though it canceled off, before you canceled it off, if I would have plugged in negative 5, we would have gotten a 0 on the bottom. So even if it cancels off, okay? So these canceled each other off, and we got 0, okay? Our domain is still not all real numbers, though, because before we canceled stuff off, you had to plug in numbers that were, I mean, here's the deal. If I give you this, when you subtract something from itself, you always get 0, right? Okay? So, are these the same thing? Square root of negative 7 and square root of negative 7 isn't a trick question. Are those the same? Yeah. So do you get 0 here? If you took this real number minus this real number, do you get 0? It's not a real number. It's an imaginary number. Okay? So what we're getting at, kind of a long-winded explanation right here, is this. Even though there's no x there, remember, you can plug it wherever you want then. No. Because before we cancel stuff, you got to make sure that you're going to get 0 as long as the number exists. We're only dealing with real numbers here, okay? So it has to be bigger than or equal to negative 5. Okay? So, this one, it just says x plus 5. We already talked about this. What can I add 5 to? Anything. So, is the answer all real numbers? Nope. Because before we simplified it, we had radical x plus 5 times radical x plus 5. Okay? So again, before it simplified to just x plus 5, the numbers we plugged in had to be bigger than or equal to negative 5. Now, if you're in a hurry, oh, this one's going to be the same thing. No, it's not. The answer is not x is bigger than or equal to negative 5. Here's why. Before we simplified it, we had radical x plus 5 over radical x plus 5, okay? I agree, numbers have to be bigger than negative 5. Can they equal negative 5? Can you plug in negative 5 on
No.
this? Why?
0 on bottom.
0 on bottom. So it's not x is bigger than or equal to negative 5, it's just x is. Okay, because you can't have 0 on bottom. You can have 0 on top, just can't have 0 on the bottom. Okay. Cross off 7 and 8, I'm not going to make you guys do those. Okay. Number 9. Okay, you guys need to be honest with me here because I don't remember. I don't think that we covered this. When you look at numbers 9 and 10, or even all of 9 through 20, okay, have you guys seen this before? And you're sitting there going, that's F times G. Is that, I mean, that's not a times, that's an open dot. Did they make a mistake there? No, they didn't. It's supposed to be an open dot. Have you guys ever seen that? Okay, I didn't think so. Okay, so here's how you read this, okay? The way you read this is F follows G. F follows G. And just so you understand, this is the same thing as saying this. F of G, it's function within a function is what it is, okay? We're not timesing functions. We're putting functions inside of functions, okay? F follows G. And if you saw this, the way you read this is G follows F. G follows F, okay? This is where it gets tricky. F follows G. The first thing I wrote was F. But if F follows G, what's first? F or G? G is first. If F follows G, G's first. So, I mean, if you think about this, what you're doing here is you're doing the G of X first, because it's on the innermost parentheses, then you're doing the F function. You do G first, then F. Okay? All right, so let's look at these. Okay, so they give us two functions, okay? Number 9. F of x equals what? 2x minus 1, and g of x is negative x squared. Okay? All right, and they ask us on part A. F follows g of x, okay? All right, so just watch for a second here. I wouldn't write this down over here. If I give you this right here, don't think hard on this. What do I want you to do? If I gave you f of x is 3x plus 1, I said, what's f of 7? What am I telling you to do?
Put 7 in for x.
Why are you plugging 7 in for x? Why aren't you plugging 3 in for x?
Because that's what
Because
it says.
that's what it says. You plug 7 in where?
For x.
For which x?
All.
All of them, both of them. Okay, you plug it in for all of them, okay? What are you going to do now? Plug in 10 for all the x's, okay? What if I told you this? What are you going to do now? Don't, come on, don't falter.
Desk in for x.
Why are you plugging in desk? Because it says desk, okay? Now what are you going to do? Put mirrors in, okay, for all of the x's, okay? I'm doing this, I'm not thinking I'm just being weird. No, I want to show your point here, okay? What am I asking you to do?
Plug in G.
For what?
X.
For all the x's. Plug in g of x for all the x's, okay? So, here's what I want you to do. Write this. F follows g of x is the same as f of g of x. So what they're asking you, and I would just write that down, then just watch for a second. I'll give you time to write it down, okay? So what am I telling you to do? You said back here, put g of x into f. So, put g of x into f. This is what g of x is. Put it into the f. And what is g of x? What does it say g of x is? Negative x squared. So put negative x squared into the f function for what? For the what?
X.
And for the x's. So rewrite this, but when you see an x, plug in g of x, which happens to be what? Negative x squared. So let's start writing this. 2, oh, I see an x, what do I plug in for it? Negative x squared. Then what? You can continue writing it.
Minus 1.
Minus 1. Clean it up. What's 2 times negative x squared? Don't think hard on this. We have 2x squared minus 1. Now they ask you to do g of f of x. Okay? So g follows f of x. That's the same as g of f of x. So what's this telling you to do? Put what into what? What function into what function?
In the G.
Right. So you're going to put f of x. And what is f of x?
2x.
2x minus 1. So put that into the g function. Into what on the g function?
X.
The x's. There's only one. So start writing the g function. Think about it this way. The first thing I see is g. Start writing the g function. But when you get to an x, plug that in. Just tell me what to write. And when you plug stuff in, put it in parentheses. Always put it in parentheses, okay?
Negative.
Negative. Oh, there's an x.
Parentheses 2x.
So what do I put?
Parentheses 2x minus 1.
Then keep writing the g function.
Squared.
Squared. Are they the same? No, most of the time they're not. This is where it gets weird. Okay. Find, where are we?
F of x.
Oh, f follows f of x. F follows f of x. So that says start writing the f function, but when you get to an x, plug in that same function in for the x. So start writing the f function. What's the first thing I'm going to write?
2.
2. Oh, I see an x. What do I plug in for x? What?
2x minus 1.
In parentheses, 2x minus 1. Keep writing that f function.
Minus 1.
Clean that up. 4x. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Minus 1 more is negative 3. What we're doing is putting functions inside functions. Okay? All right. So now we're doing what? G follows g of x. Okay? G follows g of x. So write the g function, but when you get to an x, plug the g function in for it. So start writing the g function. What's the first thing we see?
Negative.
Negative. Oh, there's an x though. What do I plug in?
X squared.
Careful. What's the g function? Not x squared.
Negative.
Negative x squared. Keep writing the g function.
And a square.
Squared. Now be careful here. Negative, negative is positive, positive, but do you do negatives first or do you do powers first? And this is tricky, what's negative x squared squared? What's a negative squared?
Positive.
A positive. And what's x squared squared? X to the 4th. But then there's a negative out there, so what's the answer? Negative x to the 4th. Okay, let's try 2 more, then we're going to stop for today. Make sure this is still going. Good, we're still going. Yeah. Just 2 more, then I can get back to watching Winter Soldier. Sort of joking. I can do it without you guys finding out. Of course, I just told you guys, plus everybody was watching at home. Gee, what's your math teacher doing in school? Oh, he's watching the Winter Soldier. Number 11. Okay. So, they give us f follows g of x and g follows f of x, and then they want you to plug in negative 2 and then plug in positive 3. So, I'm going to write these down. F of x is 2x minus 5, and g of x is 3x plus 7. Okay, so for part A, we're going to do A and C first, then we'll do B and D, okay? Because what they're saying here, if you look at A and C, A is saying f follows g of x, and then C says, once you do that, plug in negative 2. For part B, it says find g follows f of x, and then plug in 3 for part D, okay? So let's do f follows g of x. So start writing which function, okay? What do I write first? F follows g of x. This is where it gets kind of tricky, okay? Watch real carefully. I'm going to try to make it as simple as I can. That's the same as f of g of x. And occasionally students say, why don't they just write it like that, okay? Here's why, okay? Do me a favor. Just somewhere on your paper, very lightly, okay? I don't want you guys messing up your assignments. Some of you guys write so pretty, okay? And there's Jonathan, okay?
Well, yeah.
Don't look at anybody's paper, okay? But I want you to write 10 divided by 2 on your paper. Just write down 10 divided by 2. You guys done? Should be about done. How many of you wrote this? You wrote that? Who wrote this? You wrote that? Anybody write this? Nobody ever writes that. How about this? Anybody write that? Which of those say 10 divided by 2? They all do. It's just another way of writing it, okay? So, I just want you to understand these are the same, okay? So, to make it easier though for you is this, okay? This is saying put g into the f function. So you start out writing the f function. You're putting g into f. So that means start writing f, but when you get to an x, plug in the g function. So let's make it real simple. This starts off with an f. So you know what function you start off with? F, okay? 2, oh, I see an x. What do I plug in for it? 3x plus 7. Keep writing the f function. Clean it up. 6x, 2 times 7 is 14, minus 5 is plus 9. Part C. Now what are they telling us to do on part C? Again, we're doing A and C, then B and D, because they go hand in hand. Answer it in 3 words. It says f of g of negative 2. Plug in 4 words. Plug in what though? They're telling you an actual number this time. Plug in negative 2. Plug in negative 2. So 6 times, they're saying plug in negative 2 after you find f of g of x. We just found f of g of x. Now they're saying plug in negative 2. So 6 times negative 2 plus 9. Negative 12 plus 9 is negative 3. For part B, g follows f of x. So start writing the g function. So what am I going to write first?
3.
I see an x, so we put what in for it? 2x minus 5. Then what? What is d tell? Oh, let's clean this up. 6x, 3 times negative 5 is negative 15, plus 7 is negative 8. What's d telling you to do? Plug in 3. So 6 times 3, minus 8. 18 minus 8 is 10. And I lied, we'll stop on 11 for today. Okay? All right. Rest of the time is yours unless you're doing a homework quiz.